Good afternoon. As I hope to do, I'm now recording some suggested answers and discussion for problems 10 through the end of the second formative assessment for economic principles and policy. A caveat to all of this, disclaimer for all of this is all additional supplemental help. You already have answer guidelines and enough material that you should be able to understand why these answers are correct. And another caveat, I may make an error um, because when you're doing this in front of a board, it's easy to make an error. I will try not to make an error. Okay? With that in mind, I hope you find it helpful. I will move on, begin with chapter 10, problem 10 on the second formative assessment. By the way, I've posted PDFs of both formative assessments with Q&A on one PDF each. Okay, under perfect competition, it asks if an industry is characterized by positive economic profits in the short run, what will happen? Okay, so positive economic profits in the short run, under perfect competition, are they possible? You say no, why not? Yes, well, in the long run, firms will enter. I'm pretending someone's asking me this, and the supply curve will shift out. If there were positive profits, firms would enter. The supply curve would shift out until price fell to the new minimum of the average cost curve, and no firms could make an economic profit. That's true in the long run, but in the short run, let's say after a shift out in demand, but before the firms have had a chance to respond, in the short run, but before we allow the entry of more firms, that's what we call the short run. In the short run, the firms can make a positive profit. Okay, so and just to look at this diagrammatically, um, we have firms. Okay, this time I'll imagine the marginal cost is decreasing, but there is a fixed cost for that first unit, but it's an avoidable fixed cost. If you produce zero, you do not incur that cost. So the marginal cost curve. Let's just suppose it's let's suppose it's actually constant marginal cost of quantity, but there is a fixed cost, which will imply that, actually, sorry, for there to be a minimum, the marginal cost will have to increase at some point. So suppose the marginal cost is everywhere increasing. Marginal cost of Q, but there's also a fixed cost, which will mean that the average cost, so first, as we produce more, the average cost will be equal to fixed cost divided by Q plus variable cost, which is the sum of all the marginal costs divided by Q. At first, as we increase costs, this is decreasing more than this term will be increasing, but at some point, the marginal cost will come to bite. Okay, so the average cost curve could again, in the presence of fixed cost, okay, so the average cost curve here with fixed cost, average cost can start above marginal cost. That fixed cost gets divided between more and more units, and marginal costs are increasing only slowly. But then at a certain point, so this is our average cost curve, at a certain point, namely where the average cost intersects the marginal cost curve, at a certain point, the average cost does start to increase, so there is a minimum of the average cost. Okay, so the firms at every price will, at prices above the minimum of their average cost curve, let me put their average cost curve in green just to make it more distinct. At prices above the minimum of their average cost curve, each firm's supply curve will essentially be its marginal cost curve. Aggregate these across firms that are present at a certain point in time. If we hold the number of firms constant, so add these up, add up all these quantities at every price for all firms, you'll get the short run supply curve, short run supply, if you like, and then the demand curve. The demand curve, suppose We were initially at this point, but the demand curve had shifted out. So now the equilibrium price is, P star, is above the minimum of the average cost curve. Okay, each firm will set its marginal cost equal to this P star. It'll produce this amount. This will be above its average cost, so it'll be getting a markup. It'll get this amount of profit in the short run. Okay, go back to the question. If an industry is characterized by positive economic profits in the short run, okay, A, firms will leave the market in the long run and the short run supply curve will shift outward. Well, if firms left, we'd have fewer firms producing on this range of its, on this, we'd have fewer firms producing, let's say, at this point, with fewer, and we'd aggregate fewer supply curves. So this is, remember, the supply of the firm. So the supply curve would shift in, not out. But also, why would firms leave the market if there's these positive profits to be had? Firms would enter the market. Okay, so A is wrong. B, firms will enter the market in the long run, right? In the long run, we allow firms to enter or exit. And the short run supply curve will shift outwards, which is true. So the short run supply in, let's say, 2018, before we allowed the entry of firms, aggregated these things here for the number of firms in existence, let's say 10 firms, but then 2 more firms enter. Okay, so now the short run supply curve will shift out. Let's call this SR, short run supply prime. Okay, and it will keep shifting out, we know, until the new equilibrium price is at the new minimum of the average cost curve for all firms, which may itself be shifted up or down. We talked about that in other questions. Okay. So it's only asking for one answer, and I know B is correct, so I can stop, but I can look at the others just to check. By the way, there's also an extensive answer discussed in the formative assessment itself. Okay, so B looks to be correct. C, firms will enter the market in the long run and the short run supply curve will shift inwards. Well, yes, they will enter, but the short run supply curve will not shift inwards, it shifts outwards, as we just said, so not C. Firms will leave the market in the long run. Okay, we already know that's wrong. And the short run supply will shift inward. Well, it would, but they're not leaving the market. They're entering the market. So D is wrong. D is incorrect. So our answer is B. All right, I'm just going to stop and check if this can upload.